Okay. And we are. Cool. We're good. Okay. All right. I am here with JG Thirlwell, hot off his brand new record, Oscillospira, with Simon Steensland, or Simon Steensland. Is that right?
Yeah, Simon Steensland.
And off the unfortunate cancellation of Adult Swim's Venture Brothers, which he composed the score for, and the new season of Archer, which he also does the music for, among plenty of other things. So my first question right off the bat is, so last night I listened to your interview with David Harrington of the Kronos Quartet that you did for the Talk House a number of years ago. And you guys talked about eureka moments, which I found interesting. So I'm wondering if you've had any recent eureka moments with music or with art, film, whatever.
I can't remember what eureka moments were. Were they just like a revelation?
I guess you guys were basically saying that like music, David was saying this specifically, but music often reveals itself more in moments rather than entire pieces, right? So, and then you came to these things where you'll hear these songs and you'll have these moments during them or records that you'll listen to and be like, wow, this is something I always wanted to hear that I never heard.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I mean, I get them quite often. Sometimes I get them, and I don't really like the whole. I have several ways of consuming music, and it doesn't necessarily, it doesn't always involve finding like an aesthetic pleasure from the music. Sometimes it's kind of out of curiosity to see how something is constructed, or what sounds there are, or the construction of a piece of music. Like, for example, like sometimes I'll driving and I'll put on like a commercial radio station, like New York's old station, and I'll hear a lot of that music is really, I think, kind of horrible. Where each instrument is compressed, and the compression that the whole radio station goes through really makes it feel like you're being sold ham or something. But sometimes I'll hear something that is put into the construction, which I find interesting, like the way there's a drop in the chorus, or there's something is turned around. So I don't necessarily like that music, but I'll hear something that's interesting in terms of the construction of it. But yeah, I hear. But but in terms of things that I actually like and that excite me, I hear stuff like that all the time. I mean, I'm digging deep, for new music that I want to hear all the time. And I publish a playlist on Tumblr every month of stuff.
I took a look at that.
Yeah, and stuff that I've been listening to. The last, one of the most recent things that I bought was by this guy, John Elmquist, who I've been listening to for a few years, and he's a guy out of Chicago, and he does, I think definitely his new album really felt like it was going down certainly one or two avenues that I've been exploring in the last, for 8 or 10 years or something like that, with choral works, but he mixes it up in like a really interesting manner, and I think he's a really interesting artist. And I don't know too much about him. I know he's from Chicago. Just before you called, I was listening to Dan Deacon's new soundtrack.
Dan Deacon's awesome,
Yeah, and he did a soundtrack to, I guess it's a film, from what I can tell, it's a film about dog grooming. That was and so I expected something a bit more whimsical, but it wasn't. It was really good. I listen to new stuff all the time.
Yeah, I know dog grooming. I think Laurie Anderson, I think, did something related to dog grooming not too long ago as well, which is kind of interesting.
Well, this is this from the looks of it, this is extreme dog grooming.
Okay, yeah, yeah, like
Uh,
some Christopher Guest kind of stuff.
com- Competitive dog grooming and like in multicolors and things.
Okay,
But yeah, I mean, yeah, I gorge myself on a lot of music, and that's why I kind of publish a playlist on Tumblr every month, because it helps me keep up with what I've been
yeah,
digesting. And uh, yeah.
yeah. I do the same thing ever since I got onto Spotify, which was begrudgingly, but it's kind of you kind of have to do it now. It feels like
No, I don't do Spotify.
you don't do Spotify.
No.
It's so convenient, but it's horrible for artists. And
Yeah, that's
yeah,
fine. No, yeah, I don't do Spotify. I, my most of my discoveries are on Bandcamp and YouTube as well.
yeah, YouTube's great for sure. Kind of chasing the sidebar.
Yeah, but I don't. I and yeah, I mean, I find Bandcamp's really good for following leads, but
Sure.
I don't.
And labels too, right? It's much more
Yeah,
difficult to kind of chase a label on Spotify than it is on
yeah. Yeah. I don't want to. I don't want to really be sort of like go on a playlist where I'm listening to an algorithm. But
yeah, for sure.
there's yeah, certainly for labels, and few of my favorite labels are on Bandcamp. One of them's Pan from Berlin.
Oh yeah, Pan is incredible. Yeah.
And also there's a label from Lyon that I discovered. I don't know how I discovered them on, but they're called Dur et Du.
Okay.
And they release a lot of really interesting kind of, I would say, Zoil related rock. There's a band called Poil, Poil, who I think they're a 3 or 4 piece, and it's very guitar oriented, but very through composed. And another band called Ni, and who similarly through composed kind of rock music. And then they combined and made a band called Pineol, which is a combination of the letters in their name. So those are really interesting bands. That I sent a link of it to Weasel Walter, and one thing that he pointed out was it sounded like those guys had a lot of time to rehearse, because they're really tight.
Yeah.
But yeah, that label has a lot of really interesting stuff on it, and a kind of that has a sort of an operatic kind of group called Le Grand Spam, SBAM, who are also really interesting. So yeah, there's a lot of good stuff out there.
Yeah. So I guess you mentioned like rehearsed music. Is there improvisational stuff in your recent work at all, or are you much more composed these days?
No, I'm personally, I'm not really about improvising.
Okay.
I'm
'Cause the
more
fetus
about.
stuff doesn't sound particularly improvised either. It sounds very meticulously composed. I would say.
Yeah, I'm more of a. I mean, I understand. I listen to improvisation and I enjoy watching it live.
Yeah.
But that's not really. It's not really my field. Uh, sometimes I'll improvise a melody while I'm composing, and then I'll take it and I'll
Yeah.
refine it. But yeah, I don't really take solos on so much on my works, and it doesn't come from that place. I usually, before I start composing, I have an idea in my head about what I want to do, and I start from that point and then try and realize what's in my head.
Right. And when did you specifically start taking do you write, this is the real question, do you write like traditional scores for your music, or and how, when you're doing the scoring stuff, I guess in particular, how do you see it through? I have no idea how that works, to be honest. Like
Yeah, I do. I create scores. I generate scores when the piece is done. Yeah, I
right.
use the program in Logic, Logic is the platform that I use to record on. And
Yeah, I was going to ask you about DAWs later, but
yeah. Well, that has a score generating program, so I can write in MIDI and then it generates the
nice. Okay.
score. It's not a particularly elegant score program. So then I'll work mainly lately. I've been working a lot with Simon Haynes, and in both as a collaborator, and then also when I'm working on composed works, once I've created it in Logic, often I'll work with him and we'll import it into Sibelius, which is a scoring program, and
Yeah.
it's much more elegant, and then be able to put in expression and things like that, and page turns. And it's just they never really seem to update the scoring program in Logic. I don't think they put a lot of attention into it. So there are things in that are very flexible and very easy to do. But I don't sit down with a pen and paper and write
Okay.
music, onto a staff. That's not, I'm not classically trained. I didn't go to a conservatory,
Yeah.
so that's not the way that I write. Yeah.
Okay. So I'm gonna go to your new record, Oscillospira. So you've done a lot of collaborative records over the years, and you've done a lot of totally solitary records over the years. Just curious about how collaboration sort of rears its ugly head, in that sometimes you got to seek someone out, sometimes someone seeks you out, et cetera, et cetera. So we'll start specifically with this most recent record and how you two got to working together, and what the sort of sonic motivation for this record was. I wrote down that I thought it sounded like a mix of Ornette Coleman's Skies of America and Robert Fripp, kind of somewhere in between those two.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's interesting. I knew Simon Steensland's work for some years, and then I'd been spending a lot of time in Stockholm because I was doing a residency at EMS, which is the Electronic Music Studio, and working on modular synths there, and just experimenting with them and making sounds and making recordings. And as a result of being in Stockholm, I kept running into people, and like things would start to blossom out of that. And I met Leif Jorgensen from the Great Learning Orchestra, which is an ensemble that is structured around. It's inspired by Cornelius Cardews' Scratch Orchestra, which in which there are musicians who they're trained, they can read music, and untrained musicians who can't read music, and non-musicians, and various abilities, similar to Portsmouth Sinfonia. Well, actually, I think Portsmouth Sinfonia people swapped instruments, but so they work a lot from graphic scores. And first they invited me to write some graphic scores, which I did. And then the next time I was in Stockholm, they had an exhibition of the scores, and I got a chance to workshop with them and conduct the graphic scores that I'd written, because there's a lot of latitude with those scores, and there's generally, unless there's really specific instructions, there's a lot of interpretation that a graphic score can go in many different ways. So we did that, and then that led to them asking me to write a large scale piece, and which I proceeded to do. And then that combined combined conventional score with improv, guided improv, and conduction, and I think there was like one little piece of graphic score in that, and so yeah, it was a multi, and vocal parts. It was a multi-tiered piece. So when I was looking at the list of instrumentation that I had, I saw Simon's name was on there, and I was that the Simon Steensland, who blah blah blah, and he said yeah, and so I was psyched to meet Simon, and we talked a little bit, and And so he played his monstrous bass on that piece, which is like has about 18 strings on it, um, and goes down to, you know, below the range of hearing into like bowel rumbling territory. Um, and so he enjoyed what I'd written, and asked if he could do a cover version of one of the movements of that piece, which he did, and sent it to me. And you know, I really liked what he had done, and of course I liked his work anyway. And he didn't know what to do with that. He thought, well, I could put it up on YouTube or something. I said, no, well, why don't we just expand it into an album? And so we proceeded to send files back and forth between Brooklyn and Stockholm, and that's kind of how it grew. I mean, I knew his work. He didn't know my work, which is fine. I don't feel like the need to carry my baggage around everywhere I go. But he knew what I had done was Great Learning Orchestra, and I knew, you know, and I knew that there were things that I wanted to say in that kind of vocabulary of the album, you know, which is, you know, which I feel like touches on, you know, the best side of progressive rock, and also Zoil, and through composition, just like, you know, and contemporary composition, and, you know, just scored music, and, you know, a lot of different things. So it's kind of, you know, and, you know, and, you know, throwing in cinematic elements, it's got a lot of things in the mix.
Yeah,
and,
for sure.
and, you know, I wanted to play up to Simon's strengths as well. And then when Simon brought in Morgan Agren on drums, and I was very excited to have him on the record because I knew his work as well. And Morgan brought a real lot to the pieces.
Cool. Yeah, it's a great record. It's this excellent synthesis of lots of different sounds, but very cohesive. You know, but certainly cinematic. I'd say that that's definitely true. So I guess we already talked about Dawes. I have a completely different question. Something I've been thinking about a lot recently is the nature of sampling and plagiarism and all of that in music and in the broader context. And if you have any strong feelings about such, where does it draw the line, etc. Because I'm in college right now, and I've been debating with an art teacher who is very anti-plagiarism, and then I'm sending him Public Enemy records, being like, well, what about this, you know?
Well, the way the Public Enemy sample is, you know, there's a lot of layering on what they do, and there's a lot of disparate sounds, and they create, you know, so in the you know, the 90s Public Enemy. I mean, I think that their latest stuff isn't so sample heavy. But in the classic Bomb Squad productions, there's a lot of stuff going on, and you can't necessarily unpack everything. But what's interesting about that is there's a group called Brownout that recently made an album. I first became aware of them because I heard them on a radio show on WFUV on Saturday nights. There's this guy that plays sort of funky stuff, and he played a version of them doing this big band version of Black Sabbath, and I thought it was amazing. And I looked them up, and they'd done two volumes of Black Sabbath covers, and one volume which is called Fear of a Brown Planet, and they did arrangements of the classic Public Enemy tracks for their big band. And what's interesting about it is that it's not that interesting. You know, it actually takes out a lot of the excitement and a lot of the weird sounds, and it harkens back to whatever the original sample was. Which was maybe taken from, you know, a funk record or something from the 70s or something. And so it's sort of just stripped back to that, and it doesn't have the dissonance that was going on in those productions. So it actually makes it less interesting. Although their versions of the Black Sabbath stuff is great, so that's one approach to sampling. I mean, to be honest, I don't hear a lot of people doing sampling these days. Or if people are doing it, I'm not aware. I'm not aware of how people are using that.
Yeah, outside of hip hop, I don't know how particularly trendy it is.
Then there's a lot of of course, like in 80s and 90s, there was a lot of sampling where people would take 2 bars of a song and loop it, and then that was a hit. Like the Puff Daddy type style of sampling, which is basically taking a Police song or a Rod Stewart song or something, looping that, and then that's the song. That is, of course, not interesting to me at all. And even Jay Dilla was doing stuff like that, and there's been a lawsuit against Jay Dilla recently about this 10cc song that he co-opted, the song Worst Band in the World. And when I first heard that Jay Dilla song, I was like, okay, he's taken this, he's basically sampled a bunch of it and put it back together again, but he didn't really put much else into it.
Yeah.
But it was a great song to start with. And so what he ended up with was great. And so people thought that was a great Jay Dilla track without knowing that the track was great to start with. And I don't think he added a lot to that. The last person I heard that was really taking the vocabulary of sampling forward was Amon Tobin.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And I really feel like he turned it on its head.
Oh yeah, he truly flips, truly flips records.
And when I first listened to his stuff, I didn't know how he did it. I didn't know what he was doing, and this is coming from someone who's done a bit of sampling in his day, and that was really exciting to me. And there were, obviously you could tell some things, but he would take micro sections. He would drench bits in reverb and put them forward and back, and he was a real artist in the world of sampling. I still use samples, but I wouldn't say that they're always necessarily the backbone of what I'm doing. Sometimes they're kind of more the icing on the cake. But I use it in a lot of different ways, but I'm not sure what people are doing in the world of sampling now, to be honest.
Yeah, well, there's the whole vaporwave thing. I don't know if you...
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and the 10 Tricks Point Never and that kind of stuff, the sort of second genesis of plunderphonics, if you will.
Yeah,
which I don't really know if plunderphonics is...
Never use sampling a lot?
Hmm?
Do you think 10 Tricks Point Never uses sampling a lot?
I know he does, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, not on his last 2 records, I don't think. I think that he probably couldn't get away with some of the stuff he was doing. I know he takes a lot of stuff from YouTube, is what I've read.
Yeah.
To records, right?
Well, the vaporwave stuff, and there's the vaporwave, and I guess, which I guess would fall into the category of hauntology, which is, I guess, I don't know where that phrase came from. I think it was made up by The Wire or something.
Okay. I don't know what that means.
Hauntology. I think hauntology is, from what I understand, it's kind of like, it's like vaporwave, where you have this half-remembered melody that sort of evokes something that
Was that in reference to James Ferrero's Far Side Virtual? I think they gave that the best album of the year like a decade ago.
Yeah, I'm not sure what they're talking about with hauntology, but it seems to be. When vaporwave came along, vaporwave to me sounds a bit like the music being played in an empty shopping mall, recorded from the other end of the building, and there's bits of that are okay. And I think there's this guy, The Caretaker. Do you know his stuff?
I love The Caretaker. Yeah, he's a pretty important fella these days, it seems like.
but to me, his stuff is just like sampling something and looping it and putting some reverb on it. It's not interesting to me, you know.
Okay, yeah. I think it just sounds good, but it is clearly something not labored over. I would say.
Yeah, yeah. To me, I don't think there's enough new content.
Yeah. I don't think he does that anymore, to be clear. I think his new records
Okay.
are wholly original music, but I can't say that for a fact.
But but in terms of plagiarism, um,
And
you
like
know,
appropriation, I should say as well. Like the kind of lines between those two.
okay, I mean, just getting away from appropriation and plagiarism, but just to, I mean, most culture is built on something that came before, you know. Uh,
Yes, very
you know,
much so.
you're not really trying to, you know, I mean, a lot of it is not trying to reinvent the wheel. You know, of course, there are people who want to start from ground zero, and you know, you can think of, say, Harry Parch building instruments, or
Yeah.
Bertoya, you know, building sculptures and, you know, things like that. But there is a lot of building on what's happened before, and as much as I, you know, um, have been motivated by trying to create something that is new and fresh and furthers my musical vocabulary every time. Um, I can't help but have like a lot of cultural detritus in me, and like,
Yeah.
you know, dozens of years of culture in my DNA that is somehow embedded there and is going to come out of my pores somehow, whether I like it or not. You know?
Yeah. I do think too, like, you know, the whole like 10,000 hours mastery concept, which I think is kind of BS. But I do think some of those 10,000 hours are listening and consuming, you know, without a doubt.
Yeah, it could be.
Outside of virtuosity.
I found I hit the 10,000 hour thing with composing scoring.
Oh yeah.
I did, you know, when I started scoring, it was much more laborious and more difficult to do, and I overwrote, and and then I hit a certain point where I got both better and faster, and
Yeah.
I felt that was my 10,000 hour mark.
And okay, I guess we could talk about the Venture Brothers, I suppose, if you'd like. How did that start? Had you done any scores before? I had a hard time finding information on that.
Yeah, I've done a bit of scoring. I did a lot Richard Kearns films in
Okay.
the 80s, and I've done some bits and pieces for other people. And but you know, the way it came about was because a lot of my music sounds cinematic, and the director of Venture Brothers, the creator of Venture Brothers, Chris McCulloch, contacted me. Someone had turned him on to my Steroid Maximus project,
Right.
and when he heard that, he felt that encapsulated what he was trying to get across with the pilot of Venture Brothers. So they tracked me down and contacted me and said, was I interested in scoring it? And they ended up licensing a bunch of Steroid Maximus stuff, and I wrote some original score for that pilot. And then that got picked up, and then they came back to me again and said, would you like to do this? And I eventually said, yeah. And
Yeah.
we went on from there. Yeah, we did. That was in 2003. We did 7 seasons. And
in 15 years. It's pretty wild.
yeah. I'm not 100. I'm not. I wouldn't 100% put the nail in the coffin yet on Venture Brothers.
Doesn't seem like it from what I've seen on the web that it's totally dead in the water.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see. It's, you know, I mean, I think that people want to see more of it. I mean, there's a lot of, you know, politics involved in.
I'm sure.
With a show like that. So,
Big Warner
But
Brothers.
yeah, doing that volume of work. I mean, that, and then it took 10 years before after that until I started doing Archer.
Yeah.
Um, but, you know, doing these works on, such a great volume of work on Venture Brothers and Archer really changed my composing and changed my approach to things.
Would you say it was changed it for the better?
Oh yeah,
Hell yeah.
absolutely. It made me better. Yeah.
Yeah. You started doing Archer in the 7th season. That's correct, right?
Yeah, I started on season 7.
Okay. Yeah.
We just finished season 11.
There you go. Yeah. I watched a couple episodes from season 7 yesterday, and the notable change in music is definitely there.
Oh, good.
Yeah. Okay. I don't know. I guess we could call it there if you want. I don't know.
Hmm?
Sure.
Yeah.
I don't think I have. Actually, I got one more question for you. Like, I'm curious about workflow and how that's changed for you throughout the years. Because I know everybody works different. I interact with a lot of hip hop guys, generally speaking, and there's a very specific way in which hip hop is often recorded. It's very spontaneous, very very fast moving, generally speaking. There's a few people in hip hop who work slow and methodically, like Kanye West. It's definitely one of the few grand perfectionists in hip hop, but for better or for worse. Yeah. So yeah, what is your like process of creative process look like if there is a formal thing? Do you have any habits? Do you have any philosophies?
Well, I work on a lot of different types of music, and I work on a lot of different projects, and not everything is, I don't have the same methodology for everything that I do, but I think that, as I said, I learned a lot from scoring, and it made me approach composition a little differently. When I look at a score, it's like problem solving.
Right.
I can look at, say, an animatic and look at the time code and say, okay, a cue has to start at a certain time and it ends there, and it ends at this other time. So it's 2 minutes 26 seconds long, and then I have these certain beats. I have to, at 57 seconds there's a reaction shot, and then pace picks up at 1 minute 26 seconds until 1 minute 37 seconds. Then it drops down. There's a bit of dialogue. I've got to come out a bit for that to let that in. And then there's an explosion, and then it gets really sad at the end. So I've got a structure there, and I think of, okay, what key is it in? What's the tempo? Go. So then I have to solve that problem.
It sounds very gratifying, honestly.
Yeah. So and it took me a while to realize that that's to refine it to that approach.
Yeah.
And then I might have to do that 15 times in an episode. So I found that approach has sort of crossed over into the rest of my music too. I mean, I know there's been times in my life where I have a blank canvas and I sit down at a blank canvas and go, what's it going to be? And something unfolds, but it's not, things within a composition unfold and I surprise myself. But normally I go in kind of with an idea of what I want to do and a structure of what I want to do. And it's interesting to collaborate with, in recent years. The Steensland thing was exciting because I wanted to hear what he would bring back, how he would respond to what I did. And then he would send me things and I would respond to them. Because, we don't really know each other, to be honest. We've maybe spoken for, a total of 45 minutes in our life.
Right. Yeah.
And we've had, exchanged emails, but all our communication has been musical, also as someone who is a solo composer and a solo artist, and I normally work alone, it's a discipline of me to, work and let someone's ideas in, and,
Yeah.
I know where to push and where to pull and stuff. And then I've been collaborating a lot in the last probably 5 or 6 years with Simon Haynes, who has a group called Tradici Baci. And I've worked on his the last few Tradici Baci albums, sang on a couple of them, and we've, and co-composed a few tracks on those albums. And we have several other projects. When I performed live with my Zordox project, he was the other person performing with me, and we've written a whole album's worth of material for the female voice, which we're trying to pull together with different singer on every track, and we're slowly piecing that together. So so there's a lot of different, and when we work together, we usually sit around a piano, and start with that, and and I'll have an idea of a direction that we want to go in, and he'll play some chords, and I'll sing some melodies, and we'll start to piece together, and it's pretty fast. I mean, we can have the bones of a song together in an afternoon, and usually a pretty good one too. But then it can take a long time to flesh out the arrangement on that, and I've been trying to think about what I want to do with the next Fetus album for years now.
Yeah.
And it's because I feel like it's the end of this chapter with Fetus, and I don't really want to repeat myself. But I know that I have the building blocks of 40 years of working as Fetus. But I also want to surprise myself, and ultimately I hope to record it with an orchestra, but it's tough for me to pull out like where I want it to go. And I have a few ideas, but it's the more other projects that I have, then I get satiated. I mean, I don't feel like I need to write songish songs with Fetus, because I've done so many of them with Simon, and I don't feel like I have to, I've got Zordox where I exercise all my electronic kind of desires, and then and one of the reasons Manorexia has disappeared is because I have these other solo projects, Color and Nocebo and Silver Mantis, and those supply the juice that I used to use on Manorexia. And the reason there's no Steroid Maximus albums is because all my Steroid Maximus albums ideas go into Archer and Brothers. And then and so you drain your projects dry, and then you go, well, they turn into something else and they evolve, and so what's next with Fetus? I mean, I don't know. I mean, I really feel like I want to pursue this operatic direction, and then some other things, and so who knows? But I work on music every day, and I chip away. I nibble at things. If I feel like I go down a blind alley, I start on something else, or I work on artwork, and then slowly things start to emerge. And at the moment, I've got maybe 7 or 8 albums on the boil.
Wow.
So I have a hungry legacy to feed.
Yeah. It seems like you respect and understand posterity, which is something I've debated with many.
Well, I want to make really good quality things, and I want them to have gravity, and I want them to have longevity. And it's nice when people discover things that you did 30 years ago. And
that was me. I discovered Fetus probably 22, 25 years after your first record. So which is pretty cool. I found it through Trent Reznor's Wikipedia page. So I found it. Yeah. At the time you were on there. Okay. Yeah. Cool. Thanks for talking. That was awesome. You're a very insightful man.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah, I got a lot of music to listen to now, so that's always
Okay,
good.
good, good, good. Okay, thanks.
Cool.
Send me a link when it's done, and I'll put it on my social media.
That would be great. Cool. Yeah, I will. I'll send you an email.
Okay,
All
good.
right. Thank you,
Okay,
Jim.
thanks. See you later.
See ya.